What it do, cucks? It's your boy, the hater, up in this mug. And I wanted to do a video on, I was going to do a video on Black Myth Wukong, but then I thought to myself, my last video about Jacob Fatu, a lot of people got pissed off, it seems, you know what I mean? And the hater I want to make sure that I don't, alienate my subscribers because I depend on you guys and I love you guys and I don't want to upset anybody. Psych! I don't give a flying fuck. The hater's gonna say it like he wants to say it. You're either in for the ride or you ain't. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to agree on everything. As a matter of fact, I prefer when we don't, right? But I just want to say one quick thing, and that's this. Everyone said the same thing about Karrion Kross, and look at us now, right? Who was right and who was wrong? The hater was right, everybody else was wrong up in this piece, you know what I mean? Luckily, with Jacob Fatu, I think a lot more people see the light because people were talking about Karrion Kross like he's undeniable. But with Jacob Fatu, people are just like, the guy's kind of mid, right? Like a lot of people are saying that. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there. So, I appreciate the hate, I appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate all y'all's. But with all that being said, let's get to the next point that we've got to make here up in this piece. You know what I'm saying? The truth of the matter is exactly what I'm saying it is. Wrestling is obviously on a downhill. You know what I mean? Nobody cares about any of this. And I tune in to NXT real quick, and I see that Trick Williams is completely out of the title picture. I think he's like a special guest referee at this point, right? That's another thing the hater's been right about. Remember when everyone said Trick Williams is going to be a superstar? And I said Trick Williams is going to have like a boring-ass mid-level undercard career? Right, exactly. He's been I've never seen anything like this, to be honest. A lot of times someone gets kind of relegated, if you will, right? But nothing this quick, right? Like it seems that Joe Hendry has come here and basically taken over completely, right? And now Trick Williams can't even beat Pete Dunne, who is out there getting his ass kicked by Sheamus, So it's we have to use the transitive property to get through this, right? But a little bit more on Joe Hendry. Not that I don't like him, because it's weird, right? I can't say I get it or I don't get it because he is what he is. There's nothing really mysterious or complicated about Joe Hendry. But the fact that this TNA mid-carder came to NXT and is now to be fair, he's feuding with an AEW undercarder for NXT's top prize really undervalues NXT, right? I understand that NXT will never be considered a real brand, but there was a point when it was, right? When the NXT title Triple H tried to make it a third brand. And in that pay-per-view, in that Survivor Series, NXT won 3-1. NXT won 3 matches, and I think Raw and SmackDown won 1 match each. And one of them was Roderick Strong from NXT, he was their mid-card jobber, versus Nakamura, who was the mid-card jobber from Raw, and AJ Styles, who was the mid-card jobber from SmackDown, right? And it's that, it was those kind of matches, right? People were looking forward to that kind of stuff. But now, it's and this is, this goes down to NXT 2.0, which when it started, I was this is going to be great. Because it was like a reboot, right? All of a sudden, all these jobbers are out, there's no more Undisputed Era, and you get the debut of the Creed brothers and a bunch of other cool people, right? But you also got to debut a bunch of jobbers. And, quite honestly, I think that the Carmelo Hayes era of NXT is going to go down as one of the worst because I have a feeling that Carmelo Hayes, in my opinion, his career is going to mirror that of Johnny Gargano. You know what I mean? I totally see Trick and Melo being the next DIY. You know what I mean? They're going to be a tag team. When Trick Williams goes to the main roster, they're going to be a tag team, right? Now, people are oh, Trick is getting a push. No, he isn't. It's the exact same thing as DIY. The DIY betrayal was even a bigger deal because, they were together for longer and they were just more interesting in general. And that's a lot. That's saying a lot. To have DIY be more interesting than you is is something else right there. But that's what's going to happen. You know what I mean? The hater's going to be right about that too. But in the meanwhile, if you will, we've got Joe Hendry up in this piece. And Joe Hendry is out there taking main event spots. This really shows how poor just the NXT roster is as well, right? There's nobody. It's like the roster is now supplemented by these jobbers, And yeah, with all that being said, the roster is just not looking good, And another indicator of this is the fact that they added that extra like belt for the women. And it's like, you're just trying to make the women relevant, but it's just not going to happen. And basically, it all comes down to who they decide to push, right? The logic in NXT is, and it's going to sound like it makes sense, but it doesn't, right? The logic in NXT is push whoever is over. But that's not smart. And the reason why that's not smart is because who cares who's over, right? Being over is immaterial to the entire context of wrestling, right? You have to think more long-term, meaning you have to be able to anticipate who is going to, if you will, stay over, right? If someone is over, doesn't mean they're going to be relevant, right? So a great example of this would be Jada Parker. I think her name's Jada Parker. Whatever. Everyone's like clamoring about her like she's some big deal, you know? And like, you know, I hope she does well, but like she's getting a push to the women's title. She might beat Roxanne Perez because it just seems, doesn't it just seem like Roxanne Perez is just like ready to go to the main roster? It seems like she's been in NXT for a fucking eternity. So like, they want to find the new person, or they're going to do the same thing they did with Trick Williams, right? It was time for Ilya Dragunov and Carmelo Hayes to move to the main roster and become jobbers, so they needed someone else to pick up the slack. They're doing the same thing, I think, with Jada Parker, and it's like it's not gonna pan out because, I mean, unless she improves, anything's possible, I suppose, right? But it's like, it's just, she's a placeholder, right? Trick Williams is a placeholder. Like, look at what happened to him. He had a meaningless title reign, and basically, it was followed up by the debut of two wrestlers that the WWE holds in higher esteem. Ethan Page, who obviously beat him for the title, as well as, of course, our good buddy, Joe Hendry, that everyone likes, right? But none of these guys, Ethan Page, Joe Hendry, none of these guys are going to actually be anything. Like, you know, when was the last time we saw an NXT champion that we thought, wow, this person could be a main eventer, aside from Braun Breaker? When was the last time? It's like every NXT champion is destined to become a mid-carder or a jobber, right? Like, I don't think it's controversial to say that Ilya Dragunov may win the Intercontinental title, but that's it. That's his ceiling. Ilya Dragunov is never going to be, a WWE champion. Now, on the other hand, people were clamoring for Gunther. Gunther was the NXT UK champ, right? Why not give Gunther an NXT title run to bolster the prestige of the NXT title if what's going to happen is Gunther is going to eventually, become a main eventer, right? That was certainly the plan, and everybody knew that the chances of Gunther being a main eventer are much higher than, let's say, Carmelo Hayes or Trick Williams. I don't think it's deserved, but we all kind of see the writing on the wall, right? And the same thing is happening with the women's division, as well as, unfortunately, with the tag team division, right? But with the women's division, the tag team division is just less competitive because, it doesn't mean anything. If Axiom and Nathan Frazier become the tag team champions on Raw, nobody cares. You know what I mean? It doesn't change anything for anybody, right? So it's like, who cares about that? Nobody's gonna give a rat's ass if they do or they don't become the NXT tag team champions. Same thing with the women, of course, right? Kalani Jordan and Jada Parker may very well become women's champions on Raw and SmackDown, right? But that just doesn't mean anything. The problem is they're not going to become these massive stars, right? They're not going to become like Bianca Belair or Charlotte Flair because they just don't have what it takes, in my personal opinion. And it doesn't even take that much to be a star in the women's division, but they're just kind of bland, So with all that being said, where do we find ourselves? Well, we find ourselves in a situation where there's a company that has a developmental territory, and the developmental territory is complete garbage. It's called NXT, and nothing happens with this developmental territory except for just a churning out of jobbers, right? And lastly, I will say this, people applauded, and rightfully so in my opinion, the collaboration between NXT and TNA. But think about who wins in this situation. Well, first and foremost, the wrestlers win, right? So, if you're Joe Hendry, obviously you win from this, right? Joe Hendry didn't need to be signed by WWE because he can just be signed by TNA and then fall through the cracks and become the number one contender to the NXT title, right? Zachary Wentz benefited a lot because now he has a job again, you know what I mean? And it looks like he might get signed to WWE eventually, right? So with all that being said, those people benefited. Some of the NXT guys benefit too because they get to, not Damon Kemp, but the black guy from the No Quarter Catch crew. That guy's awesome, by the way. I like that guy a lot. He gets to go to NXT and maybe get a little, I mean, to TNA and get a little bit better, right? But as a whole, TNA benefits more than WWE, right? Because TNA gets to showcase their stars, and now, the viewer might think, oh, wow, Joe Hendry, who I like, let's say, is great, and he was in TNA. Let's see what else TNA has to offer, right? Whereas the opposite is not going to happen in NXT because there's nobody that watches TNA that doesn't watch NXT. It's just probably like very few people, right? But the NXT roster suffers because it paints them out as jobbers. It basically says, we've hired too many people, and some of them now have to go become jobbers in TNA, right? Or maybe even become mid-carders in TNA. But they're not going to become TNA champion, right? Unless they've worked something out. But even then, it wouldn't really mean much, right? So there you have it. Jordan Grace, Zachary Wentz, Joe Hendry, hopefully Moose, a few, Eric Young, I hope he finds his way back. A few people are going to find their way to do, WWE, right? And that's good for them. And I'm happy for them. But it just shows that NXT just doesn't have enough star power, that they picked the wrong people. With that being said, motherfuckers, this has been a list of reasons why NXT sucks.